Ladies and gentlemen, it's again a personal as well as a professional honor for me to introduce our next speaker. I must say that Ambassador Makase Nyaphisi has been one of my oldest friends actually and partners in Berlin. I think we got to know each other around the time when I arrived in Berlin. He's been extremely gracious in supporting our program called Cultural Diplomacy in Africa, a forum for young leaders, where we actually bring together African young leaders from the continent as well as the diaspora. He's also been very supportive of a series of conferences we've been doing the last 3 years called The Rise of Africa, looking at actually the positive developments taking place across the continent. And the third reason why, again, personally I'm very happy, is he's actually one of the most passionate ambassadors that I know of in Berlin in terms of cultural diplomacy. And he's really spoken quite eloquently on a number of occasions at ICD, in the parliaments, also the America House, on actually cultural diplomacy in Africa, which is really rare. There's not so much research in the field, especially cultural diplomacy in Africa. So that's why I convinced him to come again today. It was difficult because he has a very difficult schedule, but I'm really happy that you took the time to come and speak with us. Let me now go to the professional introduction in terms of some of the very impressive background that His Excellency, Dr. Makase Nyaphisi has. He was appointed ambassador of the Kingdom of Lesotho here in Germany in 2006. Other countries of accreditation right now include Austria, France, the Holy See, and Monaco. Dr. Nyaphisi has received medical training at the Martin Luther University in Halle-Wittenberg, Germany. So that was actually where his chapter began with Germany, so much before when he began his term as ambassador. He's currently married and has 4 children. Dr. Nyaphisi holds a master's degree from Johns Hopkins University, School of Hygiene and Public Health in Baltimore, USA, certificate in primary health care, University of Hawaii in Honolulu, and a certificate in epidemiology and disease control from Nairobi University in Kenya. Prior to his appointments, Dr. Nyaphisi worked in the Ministry of Health from 1981 until 1991, where he rose to the rank of Senior Medical Officer and subsequently became the Director of Hospital Services. He was later seconded to the Lesotho Highlands Development Authority, LHDA, and became its Deputy General Manager thereafter. Dr. Nyaphisi is a member of several national and international health organizations and has published quite a number of professional journals on health and development. So what you see here is a rare combination of actually someone with a medical background who then moved into the field of diplomacy, which I think also gives a very special advantage to actually his diplomatic efforts in Germany as well as abroad. The lecture title that His Excellency has chosen is, actually we'll just set up the laptop as well for the PowerPoint, SADC, or SADC, Regional Integration and Developments, the Challenges Facing Lesotho. So I'd ask you to please join me in a very, very warm welcome for His Excellency, Ambassador Makase Nyaphisi. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. It is an honor and a privilege for me to have been invited here. And as Mark has indicated, I really enjoy being here, and I hope that I will live up to the expectation. Before I start my Thank you. My talk, I would like to find out from you, how many of you have been to Africa? Please? Okay. How many of you have been to Southern Africa? Okay. How many have been to Lesotho? Okay, how many have been to South Africa? Okay, good. So, the reason why I'm asking this is because, how many of you know where Lesotho is? Something is happening here which, okay. So my topic today is going to be the SADC regional integration and development, the challenges that are facing Lesotho, and how we can build bridges out of poverty. Oops. As you are aware, the current global economic crisis did not only affect Europe, but it affected a number of countries. I mean, the whole globe. We started in the United States and then has led to Europe with the recent pictures that you have seen in Greece and the Wall Street movement, all people been disgruntled with the whole financial management system, which made the economies to collapse. On the other hand, you still have plenty of people in the whole world, especially in developing countries, who are poor. In particular, in Africa and in least developing countries, including my own country. This global economic crisis has led to a number of things that have happened. Food insecurity, increase in poverty, and what is called the Arab Spring, where the youth in particular took to the streets, wanted to liberate themselves, where the rule of law, democracy, good governance was an issue, and human rights. The reason was really dissatisfaction. There's tremendous dissatisfaction to what is happening in the world at the moment. So it is important that countries must poise themselves towards making sure that they address these injustices that are happening. This map shows the SADC countries. There are 15 SADC countries, all at different developmental stages of economy in terms of size. Some of them are very highly developed, like South Africa, for instance, Mauritius. Some of them are in the middle income bracket, like Namibia, Botswana. Some of them are least developing countries, or they belong to that group of countries that are called LDCs, and Lesotho is one of them. So out of the 15 member states, 7 of them belong to the least developing countries. That's Lesotho, Zambia, Malawi, Mozambique, Tanzania, and the DRC. However, some of these countries, like DRC, has got huge natural resources. So you need to tap on those. There are the SADC countries. SADC was actually set as a SADC, Southern African Development Community, in 1992. It has 3 major goals that it set itself to be able to do to advance economic integration or economic progress. One was that by 2008, there will be a free trade area within those countries. Secondly, was a full customs union. The idea was that there should be a full customs union within these 15 member states by 2010. And lastly, another goal was to make sure that by 2016, there will be a common SADC currency. These are the goals that they set themselves. The reason was that they realized that as individual countries, they would not be able to play a meaningful role both within the region and even globally. So they set themselves those goals. Those goals have not been achieved for a number of reasons that I'll come to later on. The importance of regional economic blocs cannot be overemphasized. Like the EU, a very important economic bloc. There are a number of economic blocs in the whole world, but in Africa, we have the ECOWAS here, and then there's COMESA, then the SADC, as I mentioned, and then the Eastern African Community. The oldest customs union is SACU, comprising of 5 countries: Namibia, Botswana, South Africa, Lesotho, and Swaziland. This is the oldest customs union. And the idea is that with this customs union, the idea was that within the SADC region, we're going to have a single customs union and possibly moving it further up to the COMESA. Again, with an idea of making sure that trade liberalization, economic growth, bridging the gaps between the rich and the poor countries within the region, and playing a meaningful role in the global economic growth could be strengthened. This just shows the relative position of Lesotho, geographical position to South Africa. Lesotho is entirely surrounded by South Africa. It's an enclave. That means, and very mountainous with a population of 2 million people. Highly mountainous, 3/4 of the country is mountainous. Very fragile ecosystem, landlocked, but endowed with water resources. Water is the most important resource after people. People are the most important resources that we have, followed by water. That is how Lesotho looks like, and I'll come back to this. That's the infrastructure around Lesotho and inside Lesotho. And there are other initiatives that are going to be undertaken, and I'll talk to you later about them, how we can be able to, how SADC and Lesotho are standing up to the challenges of bridging the gaps to make sure that we alleviate poverty. One of the greatest challenges that we're going to be having is water scarcity. It's a huge problem, even globally. This map shows the projected or the current water resources that are available and the scarcity that is there. It is important in the context that I will indicate to you later on how Lesotho intends to address this. You can see that most of the countries within the SADC region in Southern Africa fall within this range of high stress to very high stress. And North Africa, and a greater part of Asia. To some extent out of the United States, pockets in Latin America. This is important because unless the issue of water management and resource management is not contained, can lead to conflicts and can lead to reduced agricultural production, will lead to food scarcity, increase in commodities, and not being able for people to live a better quality of life. This is one of the challenges that we're having within that region. As I indicated, Lesotho has got it is not only endowed with beauty, because it is mountainous, but we also have abundant water resources. And to this end, the government of Lesotho has agreed with the government of the Republic of South Africa to harness water. And we've harnessed water. We've built at the moment 2 big, huge dams, which we export water through tunnels, about 45 kilometers of tunnels, to South Africa for industrial development in South Africa. We're going to be building a 3rd dam. The advanced infrastructure is going to start in a year's time, with a possible outcome of exporting water by 2018 or 2020. The reason is to address this water scarcity. So it is important for us, if we have to bridge the gap, because we are relatively not well-to-do country, we have to make sure that we maximize on our resources and be able to contribute to the implementation of the Millennium Development Goals, and therefore water management is one of those key things that can accelerate economic growth and improve the qualities of life, not only of our people, but also of the region in general. This water is not only for South Africa's use, it's for Lesotho, and in fact, Botswana, which is more than 1,500 kilometers away, is also going to be benefiting. There's a possibility that in the 3rd phase, the same water that comes from the highlands of Lesotho will be transported to Botswana. They are going to be putting a share in that. The reason is that it is important, if you have to increase agricultural production and make sure that people have access to water and there's water shortage because of the impact of climate change, the negative impacts of climate change, water harnessing, water harvesting is very, very critical and very important. This is one of the things that we have looked as a niche for us, because we've got a low economy, we're not endowed with huge natural resources like our neighbor. So in order to be able to play a meaningful role, we have had to make sure that we look at those areas that are very, very important for us so we can play a meaningful role for the region and contribute to development of those good ideas of making sure that regional integration happens smoothly. The second area is infrastructure development. Without infrastructure development, nothing is going to happen. You put up the infrastructure, all the other things will get into place. So if you put up the infrastructure, especially roads, ports, etc., you can make sure that people will have access to better healthcare, to better education, and be able to move their produce to the relevant areas. So infrastructure is a big challenge for the SADC region. It's a big challenge for Lesotho. Access to make sure that it's accessible. So infrastructure is the third element that is being addressed. And for us also, it is one of those things that the government has put as a high priority over and above the other social and economic accelerators like health and education, which form the biggest contribution to the budget. We have also identified development of infrastructure as a big challenge and as a big important factor for economic acceleration in line with the SADC strategy. And this comes out within the overall strategy of the SADC to make sure that in the region you have these corridors or this regional integration networks for transport to make sure that there is the Maputo corridor, the north-south corridor of transport, up to Dar es Salaam, going to the ports, the central one, and the Lobito Benguela through Angola, and then the Trans-Kunene. So a whole myriad of networks is being developed. You'll see, I mentioned Lesotho because it is relatively so small in relation to the scale. I have not put it, but if you recall the previous slide, which I have shown you, it showed how the infrastructure in Lesotho fits in within South Africa. That is the challenge. That is the biggest challenge, and I'll come to the importance of how we can be able to address this and what challenges in my conclusion. But the implementation of this are very, very important. The third aspect is energy. Energy is one of those, of all the Millennium Development Goals, 8 of them, energy is the missing one. Yes, you can be able to address the 8 Millennium Development Goals, but energy, without energy, access to energy, it is going to be very slow to be able to achieve those Millennium Development Goals. So energy is seen as a critical and important factor or a vehicle to accelerate the achievement of the Millennium Development Goals. Not only just producing energy on the grid, but even off-grid, and making sure that energy is accessible for development, is accessible even to the poorest of the poor. Make sure that every household has access to energy. Because if you don't have access to energy, you will not be able to industrialize, you will not be able to play a meaningful role in terms of education, IT, health, etc. So energy is key. In fact, it is the key to unlocking development. This year has been declared the International Year for Sustainable Energy for All. It is for this reason that this year, and all over the world, issue of access to energy is so key and so central. And my government, the Kingdom of Lesotho, and even SADC, has realized that it is something else that is worth producing. To this end, in order to address poverty and create jobs, the government of the Kingdom of Lesotho has decided to make sure that, in particular, renewable energy is high on the agenda. We want to make Lesotho a renewable energy hub for Southern Africa with the production of wind and solar and hydropower. this year, starting from next month, we are going to be building the first phase of wind power, which will generate up to 1,000 megawatts of electricity. Our current capacity that we are producing through hydropower is 72 megawatts, and it is not adequate for our needs. It's very, very small. We need to upscale that and make sure that people have access to energy. Not only that, but we're going to be able to be exporting it to South Africa as part of the Southern African Power Pool's resource for renewable energy. Secondly, we're going to be producing about 4,000 megawatts of electricity through a pump storage on that dam that I've shown you, again, to upscale, to make sure that we contribute in energy to the energy requirement within South Africa or Southern Africa in general. As our contribution, we should create jobs, make sure that we improve the quality of life of the people, not only in Lesotho, but within the Southern African region. Third aspect of energy is that it is important to make sure that it goes right up to the poorest of the poor through off-grid and access to energy through other innovative means to make sure that even the poorest of the poor have access to energy, not only just for lighting, through solar, mini hydropower grids. UNIDO is playing an important aspect, an important part in this development because they have been chosen as the vehicle in the United Nations system. And the Director General of UNIDO is chair of the advisory committee that advises the Secretary General on energy. So a number of countries are engaged in this. There are a number of initiatives that are coming up. There's, for instance, the German Africa Energy Forum that is going to be held in April this year, where it is going to bring a number of African experts, including from Lesotho, coming to discuss about energy access and innovative mechanisms to making sure that these projects that generate energy can be realized. At the household level, it is important that women have access to energy. In most developing countries, these developing countries, women spend 60 to 80% of their times looking for water and wood to cook. 60 to 70% of their time. Women in developing countries spend 60 to 70% of their time looking for firewood and water. This should not happen in this day and age, in this century, where we've got such excellent technology and the know-how and the resources. The resources are there to make sure that these women, these disadvantaged, these marginalized people, should not be spending 60% of their valuable times looking for the basic things of wood and water. While we are still waiting for those other huge projects, there are other innovative ways that we have to be using. Lighting up with this energy saving stuff. We are actually preparing at the moment a project called Lighting Up Lesotho, where every household will be provided with at least one of those LED lamps. At least. And it has been seen to have been to work. We are hoping that by early next year, the factory will have started. Not only will this be able for the benefit of Lesotho, but we are going to be bringing it out, rolling it out in the whole of Southern Africa. This, what you see here, I wish I could have actually come and show you this. But next time, if I'm getting invited, I'll come and show you this. This is an energy-efficient stove. It's a smokeless stove. You only just use a couple of twigs, and you can cook in here. The smoke, because smoke, as you know, is unburnt fuel. Yeah, that's what smoke is, unburnt fuel. This small little innovation here is developed with the technology of Philips. It's used for camping stoves. You use small little pieces of wood, and there's a fan which goes around and moves around instead of the smoke coming up, and the smoke or the little bits of twigs burn effectively and efficiently. And consequently, it reduces indoor pollution, and the impacts of reduction of indoor pollution on health is phenomenal. 40% of kids in developing countries, up to 60 in some, die every year because of acute respiratory infections due to indoor pollution. This is going to be one of those solutions that is going to be able to address in some little way this. Not only is it going to be able to have an impact on health, but it's going to have an impact on sustainable land management, deforestation, make sure that not so much land and trees are being destroyed. With this initiative, Lesotho is one of those countries, one of the 8 African countries which have been earmarked to produce these stoves for not only for Lesotho but for the whole African market. And 2 years ago, State Secretary Hillary Clinton started a foundation, the Clean Stove Foundation Initiative. Have you heard of it? It is to promote this. And we're going to be, the factory started operating this year, in February last, so there's the only factory that is going to be producing this in the whole of Southern Africa. We're going to be producing about 500,000 stoves every year. And there are 8 other countries to make sure that every household in Africa, before all these big other dreams come through of, hydropower, big projects, 40,000 megawatts of electricity with distribution problems and networks, that at least there is a solution. That these women that I've talked about can be able to have access to clean energy and combat what I've mentioned as acute respiratory infections in children. Lastly, tourism. The tourism sector has also been identified not only within the SADC region, but even in my own country as one of the prime movers for economic development. To this end, the SADC countries have identified areas which are called transfrontier conservation areas, or ecotourism, for ecotourism. Because Southern Africa is endowed with tremendous potential for tourism. We've got the seas around there, we've got mountains, we've got wildlife, you name it. The weather is excellent. In fact, there is no region, I think, in the whole world that is better than Southern Africa. You tell me one, and I'll refute that. For those ones of you who have been to Southern Africa, surely you'd agree. So we've identified some of these transfer conservation areas of every member state, Lesotho with South Africa, Swaziland with Mozambique and South Africa, Namibia with South Africa here with Botswana, and some of them are still in the preparatory stage. In some of them, treaties have been signed to implement them, like this one. Some of them, the memorandum of understanding have been signed, but these are meant to be able to conserve the environment and the wildlife and the nature, because nature conservation and environmental management is key for sustainable development. So for us, for Lesotho, as I indicated, is a very mountainous area. You would have to be there to see this, and I hope you will. So this is on the border between South Africa and Lesotho, so-called Sunny Pass, which rises up to about 3,500 meters above sea level. It is the biggest pass in the whole of Africa, the steepest pass. Because of the height of Lesotho and the mountains, this is a ski resort in Lesotho. There are only 3 skiing resorts in Africa, one in Lesotho, one in South Africa, and one in Morocco. So, ecotourism, water has indicated that is one of our most important resources. So management of these resources and preservation of these resources have been identified by not only by the SADC countries, but also the country as being important. I have not mentioned agriculture. The ambassador mentioned here the importance of agriculture. He said already food production and food prices and commodities prices is increasing, has been increasing over the years. In fact, it is increasing exponentially. And the cost for that, for the poor, is phenomenal. This is one of the reasons why you see a lot of riots happening in developing countries because of this rising commodity prices and food prices. So we would wish that, we'd like to see people with that infrastructure that I've mentioned, that I've talked about, with energy, that some of these commodities should not only just be left, but it should add value addition to this produce agriculture, because agriculture is an important sector. We need to move from subsistence farming to mechanized farming through irrigation, and make sure that they have access to the ports, access to be able to play an important role in value addition. Tourism, we talked about energy, importance of mini hydropower, infrastructure, energy, industrialization. These are the key things that are important to bridge the gap on poverty. And these have been identified by the SADC countries to be able to be important. I've just indicated to you what role Lesotho is playing in this. In order to do this phenomenal task of addressing and bringing people out of poverty, you need alliances. There are a number of alliances that need to be built up, that need to be fostered, that need to be engaged. For us, and most of our developing countries, if you have to play an important role in the global development agenda, you have to foster those alliances, like the EU-Africa alliances, like the EU-Africa Business Forum alliances, where the private sector plays an important role in development, because governments can no longer be the driving forces of development. The private sector, the small and medium-sized enterprises, must be given the chance and be able to build up their capacity to implement some of these initiatives. The United Nations system, the donors, the partners, including none other than the ones that we have here in Germany, to mention a few. So if I've not mentioned Oxfam, I've not mentioned the other ones, the non-governmental organization, it is purely because of the space. If I were to put them here, the list would be endless. So we also recognize that with the challenges that we have, we need to foster and make alliances to be able to address those challenges. Without those alliances, it will be difficult, especially because I've indicated, we have realized that no individual country can progress without being part and parcel of a network of countries that is going to be addressing its own developmental agenda and regional agenda, and hence SADC as an important regional coordinating committee or entity. In conclusion, I've tried to indicate to you that infrastructure, energy, tourism, and water management will remain and are the most important factors that Lesotho can contribute towards its development in terms of addressing poverty. In the regional context, there are a number of factors that hinder regional integration. The issues that lead to of regional integration are very complex. They are not easy because they deal with policies. The citizens must be involved. There are a lot of legal and institutional frameworks that must be identified and be able to bridge those barriers. These are barriers that are there in terms of slowing down the regional integration process or the regional integration agenda. If you can manage to do that, then you will be able to strengthen your regional integration and economic growth, not only for the individual countries, but for the region, for job creation, for poverty reduction and development, and then you can improve the quality of life of your people. It is important that there should be some fostering of alliances in order to achieve this. Very, very important. NGOs, donors, other countries, you name them. Very, very important to forge those alliances. We have identified a number of key issues for ourselves as Lesotho, which I call economic accelerators. Those important economic accelerators are the ones that I mentioned earlier. Water management is an important economic accelerator, energy and infrastructure development. These are the key economic accelerators for which we have put ourselves at the top of our agenda. Then we've got the ones I call economic generators. They generate the economy, tourism, trade and industry, and agriculture. Over and above those other social accelerators, health and education, which anyway they are on the top of the agenda of development. Lastly, the environment It's very, very important. There must be a conducive environment in order for these things to happen. There has to be peace and security within the region. There has to be democratic rule. There has to be good governance. Without those issues, these important things that are going to be bridging gaps and coming out of poverty would be slowed down and will not be easy to achieve. There are a number of challenges that we are facing, challenges with structural rigidities within individual countries, challenges of conflicts, both inside the countries and even regional conflicts, which should slow the progress. Commitment, there has to be tremendous commitment, both at the national level and the regional level, to make sure that these things do happen. Without that commitment, we will not be able to do this. So it is important that you should have commitment, not only just political commitment, but there must be commitment at all levels to make sure that these things do happen. The other challenge is that the region in itself, the SADC region, poverty is a phenomenon, it's an important phenomenon. But all these initiatives are meant to address that. But it is a regional phenomenon. Capacity and skills development are still lacking. So there's importance of capacity building at all across the board. Both institutional capacity building, skills development are very, very important and key for development. And these are the challenges that we're facing. Lastly, with all this, without an innovative financial mechanism, we will not be able to achieve this. So it is important to find innovative financial mechanisms that will be able to address this, both at the national level and at the international level. If we can do that, we can surely guarantee that our children, not only in the SADC region, but all over the world, will be happy and holding hands and kissing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for a very thought-provoking lecture. You did not disappoint me. You exceeded our expectations.